I've got some art journal inspiration to share with you today and a floral project that would easily translate into a larger canvas or even a smaller card design. So whilst I cover a double page in my junk journal with some gesso, let me tell you the story of how this page came into being. I started this page with half an idea. Now, sometimes I have a complete picture in my head and I know exactly what needs to be done to get it out of my head and onto the paper. And those projects I call planned. Other times I have no project outcome that I'm working towards and I'm just free-forming to see what happens, and I call those projects organic. But this one it was somewhere in the middle of that. So I don't know what I'd call that. Semi-organic, semi-planned, or the got an idea but don't know what I'm going to do with it project. That might be a bit too long. Well, this page is definitely one of those anyway. The half idea that led to this project was a painted floral design with a small element of collage using Kraft paper, as you can see. The look that I wanted to start this page is pretty specific. I wanted a mostly text page from my junk journal to work on, and in fact this one just kind of jumped out at me because of those creative learning wording that's on there already, and it just really appealed to me today. I'm using a good quality gesso to knock the page back a little bit, and I often swap between an artist gesso like this one or a student quality gesso. The artist gesso is smoother and thinner, and that's kind of what I needed for today's project. So for the Kraft paper, I knew I wanted 2 strips, and I also knew that I didn't want the edges to be like perfectly straight, so I hand cut them and then stuck them to the page with some matte medium. Now I can't honestly tell you why I wanted Kraft elements on this page. I don't actually know. It's just one of those things that I had a feeling about, and I just knew I needed to add them in. I'm letting all of my layers dry as I progress through this page, or I'm helping them along with a heat tool. So let's talk a little bit about colour and paint. Now, originally, my first thought was to use gouache paint, because as I'm sure many of you know, I kind of like using gouache paint, but I swatched out a few colours and they just weren't working for me today. So then I thought about using some brush pens, as I've been meaning for a long time now to use some brush pens in a video. But with the gesso layer, you kind of get this spreading and it's far more unpredictable, and I didn't want that unpredictability for this particular project. So in the end, I opted for the Amsterdam acrylics, and as I wasn't 100% sure which colours I wanted to actually use, I just put a little bit down of all the ones that I've got. Well, pretty much all of them, not entirely all of them, but most of them. So this is definitely where we start getting into the unplanned aspect of this project. What I knew from this point was that I wanted some florals, and I knew that I wanted some repeated pattern lines as well. The rest of the project, as you watch it unfold, is all decisions that I make as I'm working through. So size, colour and composition of flowers, I just hadn't got a clue what I wanted to do until I started doing it. So to ease myself in, I used some of that repeated pattern line idea just to break that clean page ice. But I then soon moved on to the flowers, as you can see. And sometimes you just have to get a bit of paint down first, don't you? Now, the style of the flowers only really developed as I worked, as I said. When I started, I was going to make them painted with no outline, but as I painted it became quite clear to me that it just wasn't going to work for me today. I don't know if I've just become too reliant on outlines, and every time I try to change it up, I kind of lose my nerve and end up adding an outline, as you'll see a little bit later on in this video. But when we do get to the end, I'll let you judge whether you think I've made the right choice or not. Oh, and if you've been enjoying the video, do let me know. I thought I would talk you through more of the thought processes and what decisions I made as the work progresses, and hope that you find it interesting and useful for your own work. If you do, then please do like the video and feel free to share it too. And if you aren't one of my subscribers, please do subscribe for more art tips, tutorials and inspiration. So partway through my flower painting, I decided that the flowers over the craft section needed just a little bit more pop. So I sketched in that last flower to give me an idea of the size and the shape that it was going to be. Then covered any of the areas that were on the craft paper with gesso again, and painted the petals back in when the gesso was dry. And yes, I have missed some spots, which I then realise and correct as I work through. For the leaves, I cut myself a couple of rough paper templates. Now, my plan at the start of doing this was to paint the leaves in, then use the masks to go back over them with a stencil to add a pattern to the leaves. And using a template would make that a lot simpler process to do. But once I had all the leaves in place and could see the design as a whole, I changed my mind and decided against the stencil idea, as it would just look too uniform and ordered and kind of wouldn't work with the style of the flowers and the patterns. Maybe I'll save that look up for another project, as it is still sitting in my head asking to be used. So keep your eyes out for that, you never know where it might turn up. Now that the flowers are painted and the colours have kind of really chosen themselves, I thought I would use that turquoise colour as it was for the leaves, but I think mixing it with the yellow to make a grass green colour worked out a lot better. Now I wanted to continue and finish the pattern line theme, which is pretty much where I actually started this project, isn't it? Once the paint was completely dry, I then went back over the design with a black paint pen to give each flower and leaf some more definition, which it does nicely. I did toy with the idea of using coloured pens rather than a black pen, but then I let that idea just pass by. Another thought that crossed my mind around about here was to go over the outline of the creative learning lettering with the black pen to bring that back as a design feature. But in the end I left it as it is. However, I might add it later and see how it would look. Top tip for you here: if you aren't sure about adding something to your project, like those letters for example, and you can't quite visualize how it will look and how it will change the balance of your project, then use a piece of acetate or old packaging. So draw it on that first, then you'll be able to get a pretty good idea of how it's going to look on your final page. And if you don't have any acetate, try some tracing paper. So there we have a double-page floral spread with some collage and some pattern and also paint. And as it was only a semi-planned piece, the final look has kind of surprised me, but I do like its more illustrative look. I hope that peek into some of the thoughts in my brain as this came into being were helpful and useful for your own work. I will be back again on Sunday. In the meantime, if you would like some more art inspiration to get your next art session going, then try these videos. Thanks so much for joining me today. Have fun creating!